16 for now. So hello everyone and welcome to tonight's Green Living Workshop. So tonight we have Jeremy and Heather from Highfield Farm. Oh, I'm moving around here. Who will be talking to us about their farm and permaculture and how you can practice it in your own yards. My name is Taylor and I am one of the conservation educators here at the town of Okotoks, and I will be hosting tonight's webinar. And I want to acknowledge that we are gathered today, although virtually, on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes Blackfoot Confederacy members Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Dene of Tsuut'ina First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of those who make Treaty 7 lands their home. So just before we get started, you should all be able to access the Q&A function through Zoom. It's just on the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can just type them in there and we will do our best to address them all for you. So with that, I will let Jeremy and Heather take it away.
All right, thanks, Taylor. Hello, everybody. So yeah, I'm Heather. I'm the operations manager at Highfield Farm. We are a community urban farm hub in Calgary. Next slide, Jeremy. So this quote here from Bill Mollison, he's a well-known Australian permaculture practitioner. This quote just describes the vision of our farm perfectly. The end result that we aim for is to produce a system that is ecologically sound and economically profitable. So the reason why we are seeking to fulfill that previous quote is essentially we're in desperate need of these sorts of systems because, to be frank, the ones that we have right now aren't working very well. So we have a quote here about food waste. The quantifiable value of food waste in Canada is $31 billion, but the cumulative cost of associated waste, energy, water, land, labor, capital investment, infrastructure, machinery, transport, all the things that go into creating that food exceeds $100 billion. And that's not all that economically profitable. Next slide. So although even way back in 1500 BC, they recognized the value of soil, somewhere along the way, this mentality was lost as well. So we just really like this quote: upon this handful of soil, our survival depends. And that's because at Highfield Regenerative Farm, we recognize that soil health is the foundation of a healthy and successful system that Bill Mollison was talking about. Next slide, Chair. So yeah, like I said, soil health is our foundation, and current agricultural models, commercialized agriculture, it depends a lot on chemical inputs. It degrades the topsoil. It just sucks all the life out of the soil, and there's no focus on the biological component. It's very chemical, and that's why we're using a lot of chemical fertilizers to grow our food. But biology is really key, and so regenerative systems are what kind of hold that in their core. And so you can, with the regenerative systems, you can increase the organic matter, it increases water retention in the soil, microbial life can flourish there, and that's that biological aspect that actually has a lot to do with soil health, and that translates into the nutrition of the food as well. And of course, better soil for us equals better food equals more profits. So soil health really is our foundation at Highfield Farm.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the soil needs, and we are jumping around a little bit, but we like to get people a little bit more interactive. So a couple of things talking about soil. What do humans need? And you can maybe throw some stuff up in the chat if you can think of what humans need. I'll give you a second to maybe think of a couple things. I teach some of these classes at some of the hort societies, and so I try to get a little bit more interactive. Water, that's right. Water is one of the big ones. What else? I'll just throw it out. Air. We need oxygen, right? So we need water, we need oxygen, we need shelter. Those are the big three. So humans, whatever humans need, sunshine, yeah, the sun, vitamins, minerals, yeah, those are all things. So it's kind of the same thing. It's if we can treat the soil like we treat ourselves, providing the oxygen, the air, and also the water, and then some structure, some of these really important things, then the soil can be happier, and it can provide everything that we need to grow the plants and the food that we need for this earth management system to work, and also for us to eat. So just a couple things about soil, and if anybody has been in any other my other presentations, this might be a little bit of repetition, but I think it's important to know what soil is. As gardeners, soil is probably the best thing that we can support in our yards, and we have three components. So one is the physical, so that's the actual what is the soil made up of? So that's that sand, silt, and clay. Those are the three components of the physical side. And all soil is different percentages of those three things, sand, silt, clay, which creates that loam or the really nice kind of chocolatey soil. And some of the other things to think about is compaction, porosity, like how much of that soil sponge there is, right? Water movement and infiltration, aggregation, how much rock is in it, how much mineral, things like that. So that's the one piece. The second is the chemical. So chemical is typically what we think of when we think of fertilizers, right? It's only chemical. We only listen and look for that NPK, that nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And but chemical also is pH. So it's the different acidity levels, salts, which is sodiums, and then nutrient holding capacity. This is getting into that really technical cation exchange stuff that we're not going to spend a ton of time on, but it's all about how the different particles in the soil can actually have different bits of chemicals locked to them and hold them so they don't just wash away. And nutrient availability. So it all depends on, so you can have a soil system full of nutrients, but they're not in a form that is available to the plants. For example, nitrogen in the atmosphere. Plants can't really do anything with nitrogen. They can't absorb it. However, there is a plant called a nitrogen fixer, is what we call them. So that would be something like clover, or in the beans and peas in the legume family. And they have created this nodule at the root zone that actually will convert nitrogen into a form that the plants can then absorb, like ammonia or nitrate. Those are the two that will convert. So when you go and take a soil test and send it to a lab, typically they have only really ever tested the physical and the chemical side of things, which brings us to the really important piece of the biological that Heather mentioned. So that biological is really what has been lacking a lot in the last 100 years of the food system, is not really supporting that biological life. We're talking about all those beneficial microorganisms, the microfauna and the macrofauna, everything from the little fungi and the little bacterias all the way up to those to the nematodes and protozoa and worms and all that fun stuff. So if we can spend a little bit more effort of getting that organic matter on the soil to support that biological, then we can have a full, complete system. Soil really doesn't work without all three. Okay? So talking about some of those biologicals, they call it the soil food web. This is Dr. Elaine Ingram. So if you can research the soil food web online, there's all sorts of cool courses if you really want to get into it. And this is just really important to understand what's in the soil. So you have your base layer. It's like the pyramid, right? But it's more of a web. Everything's working together. So you have your bacteria and your fungi are the base layer. They're like kind of the big food system. And depending on what kind of things you're growing, you will have more bacterial dominant soils versus fungal. Then you have your nematodes and your protozoas, and they're a bit more of a predator species that will eat some of those things, and then they will pass their waste. And now some of those nutrients that have been locked up are now transferred and cycled. So that's how it all works. And then you have your arthropods, all your beetles and your shredders, and then your worms, and then your all the way up to your little squirrels and birds. And so the important thing to understand is that we need all of this in our soil. At the farm, we use really high quality composts, and we also make compost extracts and compost teas that have a lot of that life in it. It's like a big it's like a big thing. What do they call it? Like yogurt. It's an inoculant for your stomach, right? So it basically gives you that probiotic. So this is the same thing. We're putting that biology into the soil with compost teas and compost to try to support that life. And the farm is made up of a small group of people that we started off with, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. And really, if you want to save the planet, if you want to save your community, it's all the same. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. It's a quote from Margaret Mead. And look here, we have a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens all around the gardening community in Okotoks. So you guys are the front runners of this revolution. Congratulations. Back to Heather here.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit more about the farm. So it's a 15-acre piece of underutilized brownfield site in the industrial part of Calgary. So this picture that you can see here, the whole forested-ish area at the front of the photo, that is Highfield Farm. Thank you so much, Jeremy. You can see how close we are to downtown. It's a really interesting location. We're actually half a block away from the food bank, which is kind of cool. And yeah, it's just this piece of property that's been sitting underused, we'll say, for quite some time. And so now we are on the site, and we're looking to activate it. Yeah, do you want to pop to the next one? Thank you very much. So this is our core team. Mike, Jack, Jeremy, and Jay are the original team that kind of came up with the idea of Highfield Farm, and were granted this project. And then I've come on since, just as the operations manager, to keep things moving forward. But as you can see, it's a pretty small team, but it's diverse in our expertise, which is really important to the success of our project. So we have Mike Dorian. He's kind of our soil health fellow. They call him the compost kid. He knows everything that you need to know about soil food web and compost and the compost tea, all of that. And then Jack Goodwin, he was really instrumental in kind of helping with all the paperwork that needs to be done, all the development permits and that sort of thing. And he's our community support guy, and charitable food production is his big area. I'll jump over to Jeremy. So Jeremy with us today, his expertise lies in edible landscaping. So permaculture is his area of knowledge. So he'll be chatting a lot about that today. And also has, oh man, Jeremy has a lot of experience, but events and commercial food production. Yeah, he's got a lot of great knowledge to share. And then we have Jay Fish, who is our logistics guy. He's also worked greenhouses and yeah, he's that kind of business savvy fellow that we've got. And then I'm just the one who hypes everyone up and makes sure things happen. Yeah, but that's our core team. And then beyond these main folks, we have a bunch of volunteers. So we have a membership right now of 100 and last I checked, it was 134 members, I believe. We do have accessible memberships, so it's a free level going all the way up to like business and organization levels you can pay for, and different levels get you different benefits on the farm. But it's important to us to have everybody be a member of Highfield Farm, just to kind of encourage taking ownership of the project as well, because we can't do this alone. It's a big piece of land. So yeah, and we've got a lot of exciting things that we'd like to do. So yes, we need all the folks we can get there. All right, I think you can go on to the next slide.
I just want to add, so a big part of the reason we wanted to share this example with all you fine folk is because we're trying to build a regenerative model to have more people across not just the city of Calgary, but anywhere, to activate some of these underused places and try to get a little bit more regeneration happening. Everything from, you know, farming all the way to community. And so we really want to try to inspire you. We want to give you some education about your own gardening as well, but we really want to inspire you. And one of the things we learned very quickly is that with 4 guys, we were severely lacking that feminine energy and that organizational energy that we brought Heather on. And since we brought Heather on, it's almost been like we've actually got more done this last year than we did the 2 years prior. So I just wanted some big shout out to Heather for being, you know, we basically hired her to be in charge of us, and it's way better now. So having that female energy has really like changed it. We need a little bit more of that in the world as well. And I think we're going to get a lot further. Here you go, Heather.
Thank you. Thanks, Jared. That was nice. Yeah, so our operations at Highfield Farm are based in 3 pillars: land revitalization, community building, and regenerative food. So this is where we build out all of our programs, all of our operations are from these three aspects. And we'll go into each one in detail. So land revitalization. So as I mentioned, we are on a brownfield site. It's in the industrial area of the city, so it's zoned as industrial land. We're not 100% sure of the site's full history. We're kind of working through that now, but even still, it's been zoned as industrial. So what we're looking to do is develop strategies, techniques, and practices to convert this piece into a healthy ecosystem, more of a greenfield site. So we do this through kind of developing standards and protocols around the soil health, which includes the biology in there, the quality of water on the site, and carbon and nutrient cycling. We're hoping to see a lot more diversity as we kind of work through these processes, and also potentially deal with some contamination and remediation if that is a concern. Right now, we've done some basic soil testing and we haven't really had any big red flags, maybe a little bit high in salt content. So, you know, we'll probably look at planting some plants that could manage that. But contamination wise, we're not too worried about it. So that's kind of nice, but we'll keep our eye on that and develop protocols around that if that comes up. Essentially our site is we've got a couple different zones, kind of our area that we can grow food on, but then we also have this big forested space as well. And in there, since the site, well, kind of all over the site, really in the forest, we're seeing a lot of the invasive weeds, but we're starting to manage it kind of in the upper areas where we're growing food. But since it's been kind of sitting vacant for quite some time, there's quite a lot of weeds. We have a lot of yellow clematis, we have a lot of burdock, and we at the farm can appreciate weeds for the fact that it's telling us that there's an imbalance in the system. So we're going to be working on kind of removing some of those invasives and trying to populate the area with native plants, especially in that forested region. And then of course, trying to reduce weed pressure and improving soil health, especially in the upper area where we're growing food. So those are kind of some of the strategies we've been using so far is, trying to remove some of that weed pressure and mulching over areas to just start that soil building process.
And that mulch is something that we can maybe take away to your gardens at home. You really need to cover that soil, one, to help with retention of water, but it inhibits weeds and it actually will break down and it will build soil. So one of the strategies at the farm is we have a big area that has lots of weeds and lots of things that are not really being helpful for what we're trying to create. And the soil is very degraded and poor. So we're actually scraping everything. We create this green manure by scraping all these plants. And then we cover them with a good 1.5 foot of this mulch that we're getting from arborists. And that's going to start that revitalization right away and help keep the weeds down. You can do the same thing in your own gardens. Make sure that there's some mulch covering your gardens and your perennials, your soil systems. Bare soil is dead dirt. So you wanna cover that soil with some mulch. Either that being wood mulch or organic straw, or we just actually got a whole bunch of hemp straw at the farm donated. So that's another option. But yeah, I'll jump in a few times to try to translate it to your own yards as we go.
Perfect. Thanks, Chair. So our second pillar, community building. So we engage Calgarians through educational opportunities and practical volunteer work. So this season, we have about a 1/4 acre of gardens, and we've got a bunch of volunteers coming out to plant, to build the beds, to harvest, to weed. And then we do other events beyond the garden as well. We've got always lots to do on the farm. So, but yeah, that's part of it, is bringing people in who just want to connect with the land and their food, and that whole system, and kind of maybe learn how to grow, or maybe learn some of the business side of running a market garden, this sort of thing. So that's part of our community building, is really just growing our membership and having those members come out and be volunteers on site. But as well, we do take on what we call grower members. And these are folks who already work in the industry, and their values align with what we're trying to do and with our pillars. So for example, we have Mob Honey, and they've set up 10 beehives on the site, and they'll be managing those hives. And so it's not just about building community with people who want to learn how to grow, but also with these organizations and businesses and urban farmers who want to be part of a collaborative network. Because being an urban farmer can be, being a farmer in general, but an urban farmer surprisingly can be quite isolating. You're just kind of working in your own space. So we want to make sure that we kind of build this community around food. Yeah, and I think I'll chat, about the charitable food production here. That's okay, you can go to there. Yeah, so regenerative food production is our third pillar. So of course, this is the garden part. This is where we're growing food, and we're doing it in an ecologically regenerative manner. So we're using a lot of permaculture practices and a lot of regenerative farming practices within the market garden. And we're doing this in hopes of growing really high quality, nutrient dense vegetables and herbs. So a lot of the garden, the majority of the garden is going through it's being directed through like food access channels like Calgary Food Bank, Leftovers, Fresh Fruits, these sorts of organizations that distribute food to more vulnerable populations. And so this aligns with the Plant Grow Share Row program, which is kind of hosted by the Compost Council of Canada, which is our umbrella organization. And yeah, so the majority of the food coming out of that garden, it's all grown with this community of volunteers supporting that system. And then we'll send some of that home with our volunteers, but the majority of it will go to the food bank. So for example, today we just did our first big donation and we donated 200 pounds to the food bank. We just had to drive it 2 seconds down the road, which is great.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the benefits of being in the industrial area right beside the food bank. It's kind of an odd benefit that just happened, but yeah, so that was really cool. We donated spinach, kale, radish, garlic scapes, zucchinis, what else? Green onions, like a whole bunch of different greens. So yeah, it was neat to see some of that food finally go out. And then, like we've talked about many times already, the soil being the foundation of what we're doing, the soil health. We're really excited to look at the nutrient density of our food as well. So we actually have this little mechanism, little
Spectrometer?
doohickey called the spectrometer. And it actually measures the nutrient density of your food. So you take like a little sample. We're still just waiting for it in the mail, but hopefully it'll come soon and we can kind of start noticing the difference between our test beds of food that is grown in kind of the native soil on site and food that is grown in this really rich compost soil mix that we've created. Yeah, and some products will be available for sale on site. Hopefully, we're just since we're working off of kind of our first section of garden this year, we don't expect to have a huge volume of any one thing. So we're going the charitable donation route. But yeah, hopefully you can keep your eye out for a farm stand in the coming months. Yeah, so all three of these pillars, and looking at all three of them and how they intersect and how they work together, this is our strategy for a better system, a system that is holistically managed and successfully in ecologically, economically, and socially. So yeah, that's really, this is our big goal, is we have these three pillars, but we want to see them all work really well together. And yeah, because when we can do that, we can benefit our community, we can teach people to grow food, we can be successful on in an economic sense, and we can watch this piece of degraded land turn into a productive space and kind of have a healthy ecosystem as a whole, not just as a garden, but seeing the forest interact and all these animals that we don't see in the city very often. Like, they're all coming and hanging out and interacting with the garden. So yeah, it's been a really cool journey so far. We have a ways to go, but I think it's been like we're on track here to this holistic management farm, community urban farm. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Hey, Jer, we'll move into your permaculture.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in looking up holistic management, it's basically I believe it's the Savory Institute that is kind of invented this, and it's a way of looking at all your pieces at once so that you can make really good decisions, and you can, every single thing that you decide becomes interactive for the whole system. So you can actually take a course there. It takes 3 days for your family to go through the actual holistic management kind of format. And then once you do, any decisions that ever come into your household, it doesn't even have to be just for your garden or for a farm, can actually be, you can go through these systems. It's all about core values. It's a really, really neat thing to check out. So every time we do anything at the farm or anything with the garden, we go back to this holistic management to see, does this fit our goals? Does this fit our ideals? And does this fit in as an element to the plan that we already have in place? And then we're not making a lot of mistakes that we have to correct later, which is another piece of this permaculture. So, okay, so I'm going to move on to the permaculture side of things. So we say this word permaculture a few times. So what is permaculture? There's a couple of different definitions online, and the bottom line is that it's a design system that integrates land, resources, people, and the environment through mutually beneficial synergies. So what that means is it isn't just one thing. It's a lot like that soil food web. You know, you're going to have your greenhouse, you're going to have your garden, you're going to have your rainwater capture. Each of these things isn't permaculture by itself, but when you start to integrate them all together, that's where the system starts to become permaculture. So the simplest way that I like to explain it is observe nature and follow nature's example. The earth has been around, from what we understand, about 4.5 billion years, and we have only been around for a very small piece of that. So the earth and nature really have got it figured out. They are the teachers. So we only have to observe, and then we can learn, and we can learn what works best.
Jared, can I just jump in for just 1 second?
Yeah.
So before we go any further here, I just want to quickly recognize that permaculture and regenerative agriculture, they are based a lot in Afro-Indigenous practices. So these cultures have been using these ways of growing for a very, very long time. Permaculture and regenerative ag has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, and a lot more people have been getting involved in it, which is amazing. But yeah, I just wanted to quickly note that, yeah, it's these kind of fields of thought or practice, they are very much based in nature and Afro-Indigenous ways of growing, and they've recognized the observe nature and follow its example for a very long time. So we're just kind of catching up.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, and it's at some point in our civilization, we got away from living with the land in harmony, and we got to this whole, we own the land and we're going to do it like this, and it's gotten into a lot of trouble. So permaculture is all about getting back to that, working with nature, working with the land, and becoming, a really symbiotic species. In permaculture, we kind of have this design mantra, and it's basically like an order of operations. So we always start with water, and then we move to access, and then structures. So by water, I mean, how is water coming into your system? How is it flowing through the system? And then how is it leaving? You need to understand those three things. On the farm, we don't have any water access except for rain. Rain is really the only natural water we have. So we are forced to, we don't even have any real structures that can capture rainwater. There aren't any really buildings on the site. So we have been forced to think outside the box, and we actually use city hydrant water. And then how do you get your city hydrant water that isn't, it's on the road, all the way to your garden, which in our case is about probably close to 400 feet away from the hydrant. So we have, fortunately, one of our partners has a bit of a shopping problem for large equipment. He likes to go and find all these deals on, tractors and trucks and all that. He's been doing this for so long with his other company. And we are fortunate enough that he found a water truck for us. So what we do is we actually hook up water at the water truck. We rented a city water meter. We pump it into the truck, and then we drive the truck to our gardens, and we fill up all these rainwater capture tanks that we have got set up. So they're like huge, those big IBC totes, those big 1,000-liter totes. We have 8 of those kind of all plumbed together and all secured and leveled. And then we have these other 2 giant rain tanks. And we're unfortunately having to fill them up with city water for now. And then we actually have an irrigation system that we've built with a pump that was donated by the Leaf Ninjas. Our totes have all been donated by Sunny Cider. So that's another, we have all these collaborators that we work with to help the farm out. And so we have this solar powered pump that now has a timer on it, and it pumps to all the gardens in a drip irrigation system. So that took a bit of time to set up, but that would be similar to your own gardens, where you might want to try to capture a bit more rainwater off your roof to your downspout. If anybody has seen my other presentations, I've done a full one on water capture for you fine folks in Okotoks. Ooh, that rhymes great. And so, yeah, you can then take from your tanks, you can either do a kind of just like a passive water flow into French drains or into swales, or you can actually get a pump and pump it into an irrigation system. Those are some things that you can do to water your gardens. So the key is you got to start looking at the water first. How is water going to be used? Then we want to talk about access. So access is your pathway systems. How are you getting to your garden? How are you getting to your greenhouse or even your shed or your house? Are you having to step through a bunch of soil to go to your plants, or do you have little pathways so that you don't compact that soil? So at the farm, we're using a lot of mulch, as we mentioned, and we have actually had to raise, by law, we're not allowed to grow food in the ground because it's a brownfield site. So that's another crazy limitation that most people don't have to deal with. So what we're doing is we've done the research, we cover about that 1.5 feet of mulch, then we put down cardboard, and then we bring our own soils in. And now we have all these pathways between all our beds in a number of different designs to be able to access the gardens. And to make it simple, we've had to make some of the paths very wide, like a good 6 feet wide, because we might need to bring a skid steer or a bobcat in to bring soil in and compost over the years. And then some paths can be a bit thinner. So you really want to make sure that you've got your water sorted out. Then you can figure out how you're going to access your food. And then you start to build your structures at the end. So your structures can be things like this herb spiral. This is actually a feature in my yard. That's a while ago. It looks a little bit different now because there's no more grass anywhere. Your greenhouse, your garden, your herb garden, your community center. Those are all different structures, and then how can they all work together? So that really is kind of how permaculture works. It's just an order of operations of design so that we can be thoughtful in how we do things. For example, some of the old way of thinking, on the old acreages, you buy a nice piece of land, you find the spot that has the nicest view, and that's where you put your house before you've even thought about any of these things. And then all of a sudden you realize that you're in a really high wind sector, or you have a lot of fire risk, or there's no water access to your house because you're on the top of a ridge. So it's kind of the opposite. What you want to do is you want to figure out the other stuff first, and then you might find the placement of that house is a lot different. At the farm, these are just some examples of observation. So you can translate this back to your home garden as well, in your yard, is you want to first observe. So if you are, say you're planning on buying a new piece of property, we actually recommend you don't do anything for the whole first year. Observe for that whole time and see how things work on the property before you decide to make any changes. So in this case, we had a lot of compacted gravelly spots. We had a lot of weeds. The yellow clematis on the bottom slide here is an invasive weed on the list that we have to get rid of. There was a lot of garbage and junk and illegal dumping and a lot of degraded soil. So that was the observation. We watched how water flowed. There was a lot of erosion and things like that in some places. But we also had lots of flowers. So there was already quite a few native species of flowers, everything from, echinacea to vetch and some other legumes and clovers. Yellow dock was one of them, which is kind of a weed, but there is some beneficial to it. There was even some daylilies and some other really cool flowers. So it's neat, and some asters. It's nice. You want to observe also what the good stuff is. There's good, and there aren't any bad plants. There are plants that maybe aren't as beneficial to a system or beneficial to us. But really, that biomass is what's important. So we are trying to populate the land with lots of plants. So in permaculture, again, we have all these little sayings, and one of them is all about the observation and analysis, which is 100 hours of observation before doing 1 hour of work. And that's literally what we do, 100 hours. The whole first 2 years on the farm, all we really did was stockpile material. We also needed money to do anything. So that was a benefit, that we had to stockpile material and start collecting arborist waste for revenue so that we could fund things. But we were really able to observe the way that the land moved. And so that's another thing for your yards. Like, go outside and don't think about, oh, I have to weed this and oh, I have to do that. Just be with the land, be with your yard, and just watch, and be quiet and watch all the different things that you're not going to notice otherwise. The way the animals move, the way the different birds that come in, even the way the wind and the sun and the insects move. These are all things that are really important. So the first slide here for our observation was basically what was the green and the tree profile. So we have all these large poplars. There's a few other species, but mostly poplar. So we found that. And then the yellow in the middle is kind of our sun exposure. So these were areas that we noticed that were south-facing, very, very high sun, full sun profiles. And believe it or not, that's where where we built our first garden, because it had a really, really good sun exposure. The next one is hail. We looked at, how does hail and sleet and things like that hit the land. We live in Calgary, we live in Okotoks, we live anywhere between here and Red Deer. We are in that hailstone alley. So we are going to be getting hail. It is a reality of our space. So we need to maybe start thinking about mitigation of that hail. Something to think about. So there's no getting around it, and there's only gonna be more crazy storms. So we can hope for the best, but also maybe have some things like row covers or something else in your yard to help mitigate some of that, or maybe some crops or a greenhouse for some of your more delicate plants that you really want to protect. These are some of the things that you can think about. The bottom one is water, just kind of how water kind of flowed. We kind of observed how it flowed into different little basins and things like that. And then we had a couple others. The one in the bottom middle one, I'm trying to remember what that is. I think that was about heat. So some of the hottest parts of the farm were actually at the bottom, because there was not a whole lot of vegetation there. And so it got really hot from that thermal mass, whereas a lot of the vegetation areas had a lot less heat. So I noticed that when it was that 38-degree day, I was down in the woods, and it was a lot cooler in there than it was up in the areas without trees. And then just some of the other ideas, like you want to think about some things that you might have in your own yard. So we call them sectors, things like wildlife. Are there deer? You guys don't have any deer in Okotoks, right? So that's a joke. I know how much deer you guys get. So that would be a wildlife sector. Is that going to be something that you have to mitigate on your property? Things like traffic. Is there like really noisy traffic? Is there a lot of pedestrians going by that are going to walk in your garden a little bit? These are all things that we want to consider. Sun, rain. You want to make an inventory of all the different sectors that are going to affect you, so that you can actually plan for them. Make sense? And then when you put them all together, it makes this really kind of fancy looking infographic. And some of the slides around the edges here, these are all just different potential solutions to some of these sectors. So we have a lot of wood debris. We thought about mulching up this idea, called Hugoculture, which is you mound up all this kind of rotting wood and you put soil on top of it, and then that wood will break down and hold moisture for a decade and feed the soil. So that's a neat one. Some of these native grasses, look at how deep some of the roots are. In our yards, if we can start, maybe converting some of our traditional lawns, like some of these really thin root zone lawns, if we can start to add compost, and we can top dress and add compost teas, maybe overseed with clovers, overseed with native fescue grasses, we can start to build that root zone and get it deeper than that, 1 or 2 inches that the Kentucky bluegrass grows. Some of those native fescue grasses that are native to the prairies here, they can be 4 to 6 feet in depth. So you think about how much soil is going to start to decompact and start to become that nice soil sponge. How much carbon is going to be sequestered and pulled from the atmosphere to build that root structure. How much life can be held in that environment. So I hear you guys had a bit of a presentation about some lawn stuff a little while back. There are ways that we can improve our lawn system, make them a bit more native, a little bit more natural, organic matter, compost, and diversity. That's the key. That's really the key to any natural growing system. It will look a little bit different from our, our human carpets that we like having outside for some reason. You know that I'm a little biased about lawns. So anyway, at the farm, we appreciate the native grasses as well. The prairie systems are some of the best earth management systems on the planet. For carbon sequestration and global water systems, the prairies can even outcompete the rainforest as far as being a really beneficial system to help the management of the whole planet. So yeah, so that's exciting. That's exciting that we live in this area to do that. And then some of the different things, I'm going to talk about companion planting a little bit later. I have to move my little thing here to see this side. Yeah, and then we have, some storage, some different ways of doing regenerative crops, greenhouses, some of the different designs of greenhouses being, your traditional English greenhouse with all glass or glazing on both sides, to a passive solar greenhouse, which will have more of an insulated north side, and then some of the glazing is polycarbonate to get more of that light energy, but also hold that heat in the winter. And then composting. Composting is a big one. If you want to be a gardener, you have to become a good composter, even if that means, throwing, I think Okotoks probably has some sort of composting program, I'm guessing. Yeah, just a nod. Okay. So even if you're no longer composting as much in your own backyards, knowing a reputable source that you can buy high quality composts that are testing for things like nutrient density and life. Those are really important things that can help you. And that's what we actually make our own compost and soil mixes at the farm now. We have a garden support yard that we are using for the farm, but also for sale as a way to share with the greater community. We just want to spread the good compost and soil all over. That's the whole point of it. So here we talk about compost. So there's lots of ways to compost. And again, for some of you expert gardeners out there, you're going to already know quite a bit about this. But really, you just want to be able to have a nice balanced compost with those greens and browns, those nitrogens and carbons, a little bit of moisture to make sure that whole thermophilic reaction starts and gets things cooking. And then you want to create that really nice slimy aggregation compost in the end. And that is basically full of organic matter and that beneficial microbial life. That is going to be the secret to degraded soil, the secret to putting high quality nutrients to grow your high quality nutrient vegetables. Some of the studies that we've read, there's the Heather, maybe you can remember the name of the bionutrient site.
Bionutrient site.
It's like nutrient density and all that. The whole
I think it's just bionutrient.
Bionutrients, yeah.
I think you got it.
Maybe I'll try to find it and I'll share it with you guys later. But so they're looking at this nutrient density. So if we can spend time on the soil, if we can spend time really building that soil well and growing our plants and our vegetables, the nutrient density of those vegetables compared to some of these older practices are insanely different. They found that one carrot had the nutrient equivalency in these really high quality systems as 400 other carrots in some of these older systems that are, using a lot of synthetic fertilizers and herbicides and all this kind of soil degradation stuff. But think about that, 1 to 400 carrots. You could eat 400 carrots and not get the same value of nutrients as from the one grown in the proper way. So we really want to spend time growing these high quality soils, high quality vegetables, high nutrient density. We want to test it with the spectrometer. We want to be able to showcase that we can actually do this. And then all of a sudden, this whole money question about, oh, I need to buy the cheapest food. Well, it kind of goes out the window. If you can grow better food than anything you could ever buy, why? And you don't need to grow even that much of it because you're supplementing, you don't need to eat as much because you're not just eating cardboard anymore. Anyway, this is something that we're super excited about. And we're working on that. So stay tuned over the years. But really, the whole point of this thing is to build that soil sponge. So a really spongy, light, decompacted soil. It's going to be easier for all the microbes to move around, for the worms are going to help with that. And then it's easier for your plant roots and your vegetables to find all the things they need to be super successful. So grow that soil sponge. When we go into our gardens or into our yards or whatever you're doing, even if maybe you have a hobby farm, maybe you have a recreational property, maybe you're helping at a community garden, you definitely want to start with your goals. So just like we talked about building that inventory or that analysis through observation, you want to do a little bit of that work on your own to figure out what your goals are for the space. And just some examples, and a lot of these examples are from past presentations and people sharing kind of what they want to do, is water conservation. I know, I remember a couple years back, my folks actually live in DeWinton, just outside of Okotoks, and I have some friends in Okotoks, so I'm in that area quite a bit. My aunt actually might be moving to Okotoks soon as well, so I even have family with you fine people. And water conservation, I know, has been a big issue in Okotoks over the years. I remember there was like a huge water ban a couple years back, and adding a little bit more rainwater capture, things like that, can help with that goal. Yield, you really want to have a productive yard. You really want to go at it, and you want to have enough food for your whole family. In some of these permaculture case studies, in some of the major books and the textbooks that they've come out with, they have done experimentation and find that they actually can feed a family of 4 for the whole year on 1 acre of land, using permaculture practices right. So now that is a hardcore gardening group to do that. I have, my whole yard is gardens, and I supplement my eating a lot in the winter, in the summer, and then I can quite a bit, and I do quite a bit of preservatives and things like that. Like ferments and canning and pickling and all that. But really, I still have to buy most of my groceries for the other 2 months of the two seasons of the year. And I do this for a living, so maybe that's also why I have to, because I'm too busy helping other people's yards get built to spend a lot of time in my own. But yield might be something that you have as a goal. Edible food, medicine, that might be a goal that you want to consider. Habitat creation, pollinators and wildlife. Maybe not the deer so much, but birds. Birds are a big one. And if you get a lot of birds in your yard, typically that is an indicator that you have a really good soil food web in your soil, because they're only coming because there's food, right? Naturalization. So there's a huge trend going on right now of this native recreation of ecosystems. So native plants, putting things back to the way that the natural Alberta system is. So I think there's a lot of attention being put into this naturalization side. Low maintenance. As we get older, we don't want to be bending down as much. We don't want to have to go out and water every 5 minutes. If we can build systems like some of these perennial food forests, the maintenance goes down a ton. Ever since my front yard, I converted it to a food forest, there is very little I have to do in there anymore. The odd weeding, the odd pruning, but mostly I have to just go and harvest my berries and my fruit. So that's really cool. I don't have to mow my lawn. I haven't mowed my lawn for 8 years because I don't have a lawn. And it's really nice to actually spend some time in these systems because you don't have to do any work anymore, so you can just go and enjoy it. Privacy, that might be a goal. You might have some neighbors that you don't want to watch in the hot tub anymore, and so you might want to put up some trees and shrubs or things like that to help with that. Wind or sun mitigation, so you have a big piece of property that has a ton of wind coming in. You might want to build a shelter belt, something like that. And then beauty, the aesthetic. That's one thing that I think in a lot of the permaculture world, people have forgotten about the aesthetic and the beauty. I come from a landscape background, and then I found permaculture, so I already have had that lens already there. But nature is beautiful, so we can basically adapt and we can work with nature in our own systems, in our own gardens to make it look gorgeous. And I've been to some of your own yards, and you already are way ahead of the curve on that one. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I won't get into this super deep, but a lot of what we do is food forestry. So that's this edible landscaping where we actually try to rebuild these perennial systems. And in those systems, there are 9 layers. If you go into any forest system, you're going to see these 9 layers. And that's that big canopy tree, your smaller trees, then your shrubs, your large and your small shrubs, your herbaceous layer, so that herb versus your woodies, like the shrubs, right? Your root sector, so like all the layer of the roots, things like tubers and potatoes and radish and things like that. Then your ground cover above that kind of covers, and that's that living mulch. So my whole mulch thing is zero mulch is dead dirt, right? So black is just dead dirt. Then you have your brown, which is your it's your dead plant matter. So it's like your wooden mulch, and that's pretty good. Like that's a really good start. Cover up that soil. But the best is that green mulch. So if you can cover your soil with a living plant matter mulch, then you're going to start getting that nutrient transfer. You're gonna get those plants that die down to feed that all the beneficial microbes. But you definitely want to cover that soil in some way. So that ground cover layer is that, and then there's a vine layer. So that's the vines that climb up. Things like clematis in our yard, hops, some of these hardy kiwis, grapes, things like that. So each of these layers, you can actually add a food element if you like in your system. It really gets away from the annual gardening piece though. So I have a space for my annual garden. Then I also have the whole front yard is now perennial. I spend most of my effort and work in the annual garden because that's where you're going to have all those vegetables that take a little bit more watering. But my front yard now that I have this very complete system, I never ever have to water it. I have water passively through the whole system underground in these swales and French drains, but I have not watered my yard. I think it's been 5 seasons since I had my food forest. I have not watered it once, not even during drought, because the soil is holding so much moisture because it's a really well-built system. So that can be really cool. My website has a bunch of this information as well, sunshineearthworks.com. So I can post that for you guys as well if you're interested. There's just lots of cool things that we can do in our yards, and you don't have to do all of them. You can maybe mimic these things in your garden. So if you're going to companion plant, you could think of like a tomato. Actually, we'll get back to that. I think that's next. We'll get there. So let's talk about guilds. So different plants. So what is a guild? A guild is a beneficial grouping of plants that support each other in some way. So some examples is you might have a food guild. You might have a medicine guild, a native guild, drought loving, water loving, all that sort of stuff, right? You might have a really shady spot. So you might want to put in some shade loving plants as a guild. Or you want to get into that companion planting. And so for example, you could have a tomato guild and start planting some things around your tomato plant that work together. So companion planting is next. Did everybody get a chance to read that one? I went a little fast there. Companion planting is a way to plant more than one species of plant in close proximity so that things work together. Remember I said diversity is key? So what a bunch of different plants planted together does is it creates different microbes in the root zone in close proximity so that they can interact more. And it also can help confuse pests. So for example, having different herbs that are really kind of that olfactory, that smell, that can actually confuse pests so they don't land on your plants anymore. So rosemary has been known to be a really good border plant for the cabbage family, the brassicas. So if you have kales and cabbage and things like that, I tried it one year. I put some kale in the middle of my garden, just in a traditional raised bed, and I planted about 20 rosemary plants all the way around it. And I just went out and I observed. And I watched the cabbage moths try to fly in, and they would get near the rosemary and they would turn away. And this happened about 10 times over the summer that I watched. And I was like, this is amazing. This is working. But then what happened is my kale plant grew higher than my rosemary plant, and the cabbage moths would just come in and dive bomb from above, and then they would do their thing. So, but it was neat to see that it actually works. There are the rosemary confused the pest to keep them away from my brassicas. Another example is the tomato and the basil. Does everybody know that one? You plant basil right next to your tomato plant, just outside of the canopy. So if you think about it, your tomato becomes your big canopy plant, like a big tree, and your basil is like your little herb plant. So you've got two of those layers. And basil, something happens at the root zone that apparently the research shows that it will increase the yield of your tomatoes by 20% by having basil next to it. And then what do you put on your pizza? You cut up your tomato and you make your tomato sauce and you put your basil right in there. Everything's all ready for you. So this is a really small little infographic, but you can look online, type in companion planting. There are hundreds and hundreds of websites that can show you different ways that you can integrate these things together. And you can do it in really pretty ways. You can make almost swaths of one plant and then another layer of another plant, and you can really make them all flower at different times. It can look really beautiful. So at the farm, we had a big row of onions, and we started to put beets and Swiss chard in amongst the onions because they apparently grow really well together. Some things don't. Dill and tomatoes don't work well together, so you don't want to keep them together. One of the most famous ones, and this again goes back to our First Nation ancestors, is this Three Sisters. So it seems to be the one that most people know, and that is a companion planting of three vegetables, one being corn. So corn is the canopy. It creates that trellis. It's a living trellis. And then you plant beans, which will then grow up the trellis, right? And it will support up that trellis. And then the squash that you plant has big leaves and they spread, and that becomes your living ground cover, that living mulch that we talked about. And those three plants have been proven to work really, really well together. Plus the beans are that nitrogen fixing that we talked about. So the beans over time will actually help to put, self-fertilizing nitrogen around those plants. So that's an example, the Three Sisters. And then on the far left here, we just have a little spiral. This is back to patterns in nature and looking at these cool things. So there are some really neat ways to make what's called a herb spiral, which is basically just planting a little bit more. You get a little bit more of the real estate because you have a bit of more of a vertical garden. It's almost a mound with a little pathway around it, and then you pop herbs in all the way along. And what's neat about that is the way the function works is the stuff at the top dries out faster. So as it rains, right? So it'll start to dry out and it'll stay wetter at the bottom and drier at the top. So you want to plant your things that love drier conditions, like your rosemary and your thyme and your oreganos at the top. And then things that like more water, like mint or basil, or even some of the parsleys and chives more in the middle. There's different areas for you to have different microclimates. So the herb spiral is a bit of a gimmick. It's kind of like, look at how cool that, I want a fancy herb spiral like my neighbor has. But it actually has a lot of function as well. And they are really pretty. So I have two herb spirals in my yard, and they actually work really well. Yeah, so like I said, if you can't see all the little graphics here, you can basically go online and you can find this out. But here's just a few. So cucumbers work really well with beans and radishes and cabbage. So you can plant all those things together and they will work well together. Tomatoes work well with onions and carrots and basil. Parsnips work well with lettuce and radishes. And onions work really well with a lot of plants, actually. So onions are very, very beneficial. And then you want to think about things like garlic. I love growing garlic, but you can use garlic as a border around your gardens, and that again will be a protector from pests. So that's something to think about. These are lots of neat little techniques, and this is all in the permaculture world. We have a few more photos of some of the stuff that's happened at the farm. Everything from our first meetings with the city, down to finding native strawberries, native alpine strawberries on site, to having really big homeless camps that we've had to basically deal with. Lots of little bunnies on site. Somebody has apparently dropped off pets there over the years that now they've procreated, and so we have a very nice big bunny population that are going around passing their nutrient around, which is nice. And then some of the equipment that we've had to use on site to amass piles of mulch, to do some earthworks. A lot of volunteers, little education days. You can see there's me doing some more of these types of talks in person. The city comes out and look at that. Look at those two city trucks just sitting talking to each other, doing all that good work, right? And then just some of the other things, mulch, mushrooms coming up in the mulch. We've put out some little bee boxes for native bee species, planting kales and other plants. There's one of our water hoses. So this picture is actually great. So going from filling up a little watering can and going hand watering everything, to building an irrigation system and watering with a giant fire hose nozzle. We have a 1/4 acre to water, so it has definitely been a challenge, and it's been interesting. And then volunteers, really, we couldn't have done this without all the people. Even though you live in Okotoks, you can still come out to the farm anytime you like, and you can sign up to be a member. We do have a free membership. We also have some higher level memberships and donations if you're interested in supporting us. And we would also love to do, once you guys, once COVID is really finished, we would love to do more field trips for you to come out. We could come out to you as well. We could do some of these talks in person. We are really excited to share information. We really want to be an education center. So this is a little bit of a neat 3D design of what some of these spaces will look like. This is a passive solar greenhouse design that we've come up with. And then we have at the bottom a little bit of soil mixing and composting, and then a lot of gardens up top. Gardens and community events. We will be looking at this really big greenhouse soon, and we are hoping to host events and things like that over the winter as well. Oh, we got something going on here. I don't know what happened. Well, that's why it clicks me over to some video or something.
I think it's like a virtual tour.
Oh, there we go. And I just wanted to share some of our collaborators and members of the farm. Just like you find folk that have been, getting us to come and share information with you. We really enjoy these types of, that's why we're here. We're here to try to share knowledge and to share experiences. And we have this really good group. So the City of Calgary, of course, as the landowner, the Compost Council of Canada is our nonprofit. And then the Parks Foundation is basically our charitable partner. So we can actually take donations for tax receipts, which has been helpful. And then we got a nice little grant from the National Research Council, the IRAP program, and that helped us to get a little bit of things done. We have Electric Eel, Living Soil Solutions, and Sunshine Earthworks. Those are the 3 companies of the owners. And so we have basically been volunteering and donating equipment and time and money for the last 3 years to make this thing happen. It's a big labor of love. I have never been paid to be on the farm, and I'm happy with that. I'm just hoping in the end I could get some of that money paid back. But honestly, we're trying to make a difference here, right? And now we have some of our members. Basil Ranch is helping us with the garden. Mob Honey has got beehives. Common Digs is a group that does forest school. It's like a day camp for kids between 4 and 7, and they come out and they hang out in the woods. and they learn about gardening, and they learn about, finding different bird species and native plants. Global Tree Grow is a group that's now trying to grow these little seedlings, um, so that they can try to plant more trees around the world. Earthmaster Environmental is another company that's helping us with soil samples, and they're doing some neat research on seeds and trying to propagate better seeds using natural methods. And then we have Ground Cubed, which is a landscape architect that helped us do some of our design in the early days. And then of course we have people that have donated. Sunny Cider. We actually just had a big Stampede Luau breakfast, and they dropped off some kombucha for us to drink while we were having our breakfast, which was really nice. Of course, it was Sunny Cider, but we can't say that. Oh, I just said it, and this is recorded. Uh-oh. Anyway, and so yeah, it's really nice to have more people involved, and we would love to have you guys come out and see the farm, and we would also love an invitation to come bring the farm to you, and I'd love to see some of your spaces in Okotoks and see if I can come and give you guys a report card and maybe some more information about how to revitalize the spaces, bring more native plants in, bring up your yield a little bit, and really help to fix that soil. Here's a couple of our highfieldfarm.ca is our main website. So if you're interested, please check it out. And there's also a donation link if you are interested in being involved. And maybe we can go into some questions.
Yeah, remember, if anyone has questions, you can just type it in the Q&A. I have one here from Brad. His question is compost provided from the city's industrial, high temperature, sterile facility beneficial? It seems like the biome would be killed in it.
Great question. So yeah, so this is a question about the city of Calgary, right? Not the, is that what that was?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a really interesting question, and yes, so the way that the city deals with the amount of volume that they have to bring in, they have I think it's a $15 million facility. They have 70 trucks a day, full of a whole neighborhood, each one. So there's a lot of volume. So what they do is they're very, very concerned about pathogens. They want to make sure that there is nothing going to be bad. There's none of those fecal coliforms and pathogens. Those are the two bad guys that you do not want in your finished compost. So they put it through basically, it's not really an oven. It's more of like a biodigester. It goes through this whole system, and it does cook out a lot of the bad stuff. And that's actually very similar to a natural composting pile. If you have enough biomass and you have the right mix of your carbons and your nitrogens, it will create this thermophilic phase that can get up to 60 degrees Celsius for 3 days to 5 days. And that does the same thing. It cooks out all the bad guys, okay? And it's not sterile, it cooks it out. And then as it comes out of that phase, now all the bad stuff is gone. It also burns all the weed seeds. There's research that even shows it can break down some of these pharmaceuticals. It can break down some of these fertilizers and herbicides and things like that. And then what happens is it goes into the next phase, which is about a 2-week cycle, which is a little bit of a lower temperature. And what happens is all the good biology, it starts to come back in and it starts to populate it because there's still lots of organic matter and food for those. And that reaction starts to cure. It's the curing process. And that phase is where all the life starts to repopulate. So similar to the city, they do kind of cook it out and then they let it age for a while and it will come back. Now, I don't want to badmouth the city at all. They're a partner of ours. And so I'll talk about maybe best practices. One of the limitations of having a giant facility is that you don't have enough space and time to allow a process to work properly. So the city does have a little bit of a hot pile at the end that probably should age for maybe 3 to 6 months longer than they're letting it before they send it out. Okay. All that means is it's not fully finished and it needs to age a little bit longer. We personally feel there needs to be maybe a little bit more carbon. The carbon ratios aren't as good. the carbon kind of balances out some of the really heavy nitrogens. But if I was running a facility that didn't have the space and had 70 trucks coming in a day, I could understand why they wouldn't want to add more to it. So what we've determined, because we actually got a pile from the city last year, and we have added our own carbon to it. We've sprayed it with compost teas. We've turned it a few times, and we've let it age and cure over the winter, and it is amazing now. We're very happy with it. So again, there's nothing. It isn't perfectly optimal finished compost right now that the city is providing at the other side. It's basically like a really hot. You could basically mix it with 10-to-1 of other soils and garden mixes, and let it age for another, like maybe a couple more months, and then you can then apply it to your garden, and it would still be really good. There is still some really good life in there, mostly the bacterial side. But really, you want to make sure that what you're putting on your garden is perfect. You don't want to take any risks. So if something smells bad, it usually means it hasn't finished its cycle. It's still maybe a little anaerobic. It maybe is still too hot. If you put your hand in it and you can't even put your hand in it, then you know it's too hot. It's still in that phase that needs a little bit more time to age. So as far as the life, yeah, there is still quite a good biome in there. And it only gets better as things go back to a bit more of a balanced temperature and allowing that life to do its thing. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I mean, so we have one more question here. Would you guys be selling your compost?
Yeah, so we actually do. So we are not actually composting just yet. We have to get a special license and permit to be able to be a compost facility. We are allowed to bring in other composts and amend them and do soil mixes and things like that. So yeah, we actually have a garden support yard. There's a link to it, I think, on our website. Living Soil Solutions is kind of the company that does all the product side of things at the farm. So if you go to the website, you can see our entire list of all our products for sale. We have 3 different kinds of compost for sale actually right now. And they all have different applications. So for your garden, they would be great for all 3. We have a really high quality aged compost that's really, really aggregated, really kind of sticks together. And when you break it open, it looks like rich chocolate cake. It's gorgeous. And it smells really nice. It just smells like, solid soil. We have another one that we call mineral rich compost. So it actually has lots of small stones in it. And the benefit of having a little bit of rock and aggregates in your compost, like we don't have a ton of it. There's just lots of little guys. Over time, as you develop your fungal side of the soil, the fungal hyphae and the mycelium will actually start to mine those minerals and pull out all that mineralization. So if you find a rock in your garden, leave it. We used to take out rocks because it would wreck the plow. But in your own home gardens, rocks will actually form little microbe habitats. And it's not a bad thing at all. And then we have another one that is full of, we call it carbon rich. It's full of this like little wood chips. And the point of that is to, again, give a little bit more food to promote the fungal health. With these perennial systems, you want a little bit more fungus dominance. Again, beneficial fungi. The mycorrhizal fungi is the one I'm talking about. And that will help to support that. So yeah, Highfield Farms open for business. We have all the proceeds go back towards funding the farm, go back towards getting the partners the availability to be able to be on site more and to put more energy into this whole regenerative thing. We also have soil mixes. We have a really high-end inoculated soil mix that we've put the compost tea into our soil mix first, and we've mixed it and we apply it once in a while so that you're actually going to have more biology in your soil mix than you normally would at any of the other places. We want to be a leading expert in these high quality products for the garden. We are not a landscape yard. We are a garden support yard. And we also have mulches. We're working towards, converting some of these waste streams that are just going into these spaces into really high quality products to help us in the garden. We also sell worm castings, some of those mycorrhizal root rescues. We have all these organic fertilizers from fish and kelp and sea minerals and things like that. And we also have quite a few really interesting little like soil boosters and soil activators, and it gets really technical. But that's what we're here for. We want to educate people so that they can really understand what's happening in their soil.
Okay, I think that leads great into this question. How do you encourage the fungal growth in soil?
Okay, great question. The first thing you can do to promote the fungal is to not till anymore. So now I know like you want to add compost every year, right? You don't have to necessarily till it in. You can basically just top dress it. And if you have a really good biome, if you have a lot of worms and stuff, the worms will start to do that work for you. Then cover it with that mulch. So every time the fungal is basically takes the longest, the fungus takes the longest to build their network. The bacteria is there right away, but the fungal takes some time. Now, every time that we disturb that soil, we break apart that fungal structure and it has to start over. So it's really, really important that we try not to till anymore. A lot of farmers have been doing this now for decades. The no-till thing is huge in farming, but gardening has been a bit slower, usually because we have such compacted soils because we maybe don't have enough organic matter in it or enough structure. So that's the first one. The second one is mulch. Putting mulch over top of your soil, especially in a perennial system. You don't want to crowd the trees or shrubs though, like keep it a little bit away from the trees, but you do want to cover a good 2 to 4 inches of the ground with a nice quality wood mulch, not cedar. You want something that will break down because that breaking down will feed the fungal life. So mulches and no-till, the best way you can support your fungal. And also inoculations of fungal. So there's a product called Mike's. It's like a blue bin and it has these like spores in it that you plant with your trees. I used to use that for years. Now we actually have found one that we started to carry because we like it so much. It's called Root Rescue. It has 18 different mycorrhizal spore types and it's water soluble. So you just dump it in a bucket, you water your tree with it, and it will inoculate those little spores to start that mycelium network to really promote that plant health. Maybe Heather, if you can write mycorrhizal properly in the chat so that people know how to spell it, because yeah, just do the research online. It has changed everything. The average tree in Calgary, it lasts 7 years after a landscaper plants it, and it's usually because there's a poor soil and there isn't enough of that mycorrhizal network. So I've been doing this for more than a decade, and there are very, very few clients that ever call me back to replace a tree. I actually guarantee my trees for life, which is maybe really stupid on my part, but I don't think it is because I really think that this is going to work. So, yeah.
Great.
A question about turning grass into a natural pollination area.
Yeah, so 2 kind of linked questions. Someone has started to transform their yard, covered the grass with cardboard, and then cubed some with a minimum, or covered, I'm assuming that is saying, covered with a minimum of 6 inches of cedar mulch. In another area, I have old wood on top of the cardboard and small sized rocks. Is this a good start in the order of material? And the other questions kind of asking, they have a yard with lots of landscape fabric and gravel, and they want to remove it and put mulch, and how should they start?
Cool. Okay, so what you're talking about is basically sheet mulching. So the idea is instead of ripping all your grass out or hauling it away, you just cover it with cardboard, and usually you want to put something on top of the cardboard that will start to break down that cardboard over time. So compost or mulch. The reason I don't recommend cedar mulch for this sort of thing, unless you're not going to plant any plants near it. If you're not going to plant any plants near it, you're just basically making a mulch pathway or something like that. As long as it's not near the plants, cedar mulch can be great because it won't break down. It'll stay. That's why we build so many garden boxes out of it, right? Because it takes a long time to break down. But when we're planting mulches near our plants, we actually want it to break down to feed the fungal life. So, and also cedar, from what I understand, sometimes cedar can emit a phytotoxin, and that will inhibit other plants' growth. So, in the garden, you know, you have a polished board. It's not admitting it, but a lot of surface area in that mulch. So you might get a little bit more of that phytotoxin. So anyway, I don't recommend using cedar. I try to use like a spruce or a pine mulch or a fir, a shredded bark. So it's like a medium bark mulch is kind of what I recommend. At the farm, we have a premium pine mulch right now. It's really nice that we use, and I use it on all my projects as well. So now the question about rocks. Yeah, you can cover it with cardboard. The best thing you can do actually is just cover it with the mulch that you want to keep there. That will basically start to kill all the grass underneath it, except for quackgrass. That stuff, the Bermuda grass will still pop through. You're going to have to dig that out and follow the root along to try to get as much of that out as you can as it happens. But yeah, cover that. We've done that. If you're not in a rush, you can cover your whole lawn with cardboard, soak the cardboard, maybe put down some compost on top and then mulch and let it sit for the whole season. And then next year, you can start popping in plants into those areas, and hopefully it will get rid of most of the grass.
The moisture is important there too. It helps it break down quite a bit more.
Totally.
So keep it damp if you can.
The idea is you want the cardboard to break down just after it's killed the grass. Does that make sense? What was the other question though about rocks or landscape fabric, I think?
Yeah, so they said that they have a yard with landscape fabric and with gravel on top, and they're looking to convert that to like a mulched area, and was looking for recommendations on how to do that.
So that's another very common thing that I come across a lot. A lot of people even use fabric underneath mulch, which I even used to do way back when we started, 15 years ago when we didn't know any better. But that doesn't really make sense because you're using a fabric to protect from weeds coming through. And then you put mulch down, and then the mulch turns into soil, and then seeds blow in. And so now you have weeds coming up above your fabric, and the ones underneath don't. And not only that, the quackgrass, it's the most adaptable thing ever. Quackgrass and algae will long outlive all of us. But it creates a network underneath that, of a root zone underneath that fabric, and you can't even get rid of it anymore. So the best way to deal with that is you're going to have to remove the rock. So take it out and maybe put it in an area like a driveway area or something like that. Then you're going to have to remove all the fabric, and then you can throw the mulch right on top of the soil. Again, be careful not to crowd your trunks of your trees. I've seen mulch like spread around trees and it's like 2 or 4 inches up surrounding that trunk. That can actually rot your trunk out because it'll hold moisture there. You want the mulch to start next to the tree and then move up. Easiest way to add compost on your beds to add compost in future years. Remove mulch, add compost, then put the mulch back. Just toss it on top of the mulch. How often to add compost to existing perennial beds? Great question. So we recommend 2 inches of compost every year, especially if you're taking a lot of things out. So if in your veggie garden, you're growing a lot of food that you're pulling away. So you're taking from it, you need to put back. So adding 2 inches of compost on your entire garden bed, that's easy. How do you add it to your perennial bed? We actually do recommend either adding it right on top of the mulch if the mulch is starting to break down, and then adding new mulch so that you would add compost and mulch, or you could scrape the mulch back, add your compost, then put the mulch back, okay? Or compost tea is even easier. You can make your own. We actually sell it as well. We do compost tea applications for clients through Living Soil Solutions, our company, and we also have a program at the farm. If if somebody signs up for the I think it's $50 membership for the year, or it's $100 for a family, you can come and you can fill up your own compost tea. I think we're saying once a month, but honestly, we have so much tea. If you were a keener and you wanted to come every couple of weeks and fill up a little jug of tea, we'd be more than happy to let you do that. So yeah, so that's the compost membership, and then basically you're just applying it. So compost tea is we take good compost. We actually use worm castings, vermicompost, because it's really balanced. That's what we love about worm castings. And then we will we aerate it in a water solution that is not, there's no chlorine in it. So we've off-gassed the chlorine. We add a little bit of humic acid, which helps to lock the chlorine up. And then we inoculate it. We bubble this thing for a good 4 hours to sometimes a whole day. And that puts all the biology, all the beneficial microbes that's in that compost into the liquid. And then we spray it on all your soil. So that's the benefit of compost tea. Way less work. You get a lot more bang for your buck. It's a lot more inexpensive because you're not physically putting material there. Worm castings is another really good one though. Like we sell worm castings, and we have a place near Lethbridge that we have our little worm farm. And so I always have worm castings in my garden. Every time I put a seed in, every time I put a seedling in, a handful of worm castings goes in with those. So that might be an option. You might not have to spread compost over your entire perennial system. You can maybe just add it around your plants.
Amazing. I'm not seeing any more.
What else? What else you guys got?
Yeah, are there any other questions? If not, I just want to thank you both again for that was a great presentation and really thoughtful answers to those questions. And thank you to everyone who joined us virtually today. I'm sure they would be happy to answer any more questions if we send them their way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, with that, we're just right on schedule. So thank you again.
No worries. Thanks for having us. And yeah, let us know if you have any more questions, or come down to the farm, join up as a member, come volunteer with us. We'd love to have you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Oh, we got one more quick question, it looks like. If a tree's planted too deep, is there a solution? If you can't pull the tree up, then you might be able to scape the area a little bit away from the tree, so it makes a bit more of a basin, and that will help mitigate so that you're not getting as much stuff up against the trunk. So that is a common problem. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time, I'm sure.
Yes. Bye-bye.